Hi, I'm Christina Tidwell. I'm registered nurse and holistic health coach and founder of Live Well with Christina. And I am here today to talk to you guys about step 4 in the 5 steps in eating for energy and getting rid of that 3 p.m. crash or those 3 p.m. energy slumps. So we've already talked about balancing blood sugar, eating real whole foods, considering carbohydrate types, and also balancing meals, which is a huge one. So balancing those bigger macronutrients of protein, fat, and fiber, and carbohydrates, so we can balance our blood sugar and maintain more even sustainable energy. So those are the first 3. And this week I want to talk about something that people ask me about all the time, which is coffee. Is coffee bad for you? Is caffeine bad for you? And I think I get asked this all the time just because caffeine has such a strong hold on people and we really use it to power us through the day. And my answer with this one is pretty similar to a lot of answers I give, which is it depends. But when we're specifically talking about how to eat for energy and get rid of these energy slumps and create more long-term sustained even energy with what we're putting into our body, we definitely have to consider caffeine. And before you turn this off and write me off here, I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking coffee immediately. So we can still be friends. It's all good. But we definitely need to consider how you're using it and how it's making you feel. So I love coffee. I absolutely love coffee. And I've gone through periods of life. Well, I used to work as a barista when I lived in Sydney. So that was peak coffee drinking there, because you have access to all this beautiful coffee all the time. And so I just used it as, it was just a habit and as fuel. And I would, without even thinking about it, have 1 or 2 lattes in the morning, get to 3 p.m., use it as fuel, keep going. As I was working, doing nursing shifts, same thing. I really felt like I needed it as fuel. And it was a habit. And the thing is, after I would have it, I never really felt great and energized. I just felt kind of buzzy and wired. So it was kind of this tired but wired feeling. But every time it would come, to the 3 or 4 p.m. hour, I would need it to fuel myself. So that's the first step, is kind of just thinking, how are you using it? And this is coffee, this is like Diet Cokes, soft drinks, other, energy drinks, whatever. How are you using caffeine? That's the first step. Just think about it. And the second step is, how is it actually making you feel? As opposed to, how is it supposed to make you feel? Because we think coffee is supposed to make us feel energized and chatty and like we just had a little burst of energy after having a latte, but sometimes it can do the opposite, especially if we're in this state of fatigue already. So what happens when we drink a cup of coffee is that our brain sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which tells our adrenals, the little organs on top of our kidneys, to send out the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. So it's a stress response. We're activating a stress response, which is the same response that gets activated in our body when we're in imminent physical danger or posed, up against a threat. And so that's why we get the increased heart rate and the jitteriness and that burst of energy and those other physical symptoms. So, in this case, it's just after having a cup of coffee, though. And if you have, a few of those throughout the day, you can imagine how taxing that might be on our little adrenal glands there, especially if you're already fatigued and depleted. If you're already in a state of adrenal fatigue or overwork or exhaustion, you're kind of, having coffee or putting in caffeine is sort of like borrowing energy from stores that are empty or are not there. So it's definitely something to consider, how it's actually making you feel. I know sometimes when I was working nursing shifts, I would just have like a cup of that gross instant coffee because I was like, anything to stay awake, and I would actually feel way worse and maybe even sleepier or more tired. And I didn't really realize how it was affecting me. And so a couple of things you can do once you've realized, okay, how are you using it and how is it actually affecting you, is to swap in some other alternatives. So this doesn't necessarily mean going cold turkey and cutting out all caffeine and feeling horrible, although if you really feel like you're there, you can do that. But I find just If you're someone that has a coffee in the morning and one in the afternoon, just experiment in the afternoon. Swap something in, like maybe a matcha latte. Matcha still has caffeine, but it's a little bit more gentle of a caffeine and energy feeling. Having a really like nice peppermint tea, getting a little bit English about it, having a tea with some almond milk. That's what I like to do in the afternoon. Having a good jasmine tea or a turmeric latte. Just trying to swap in these things, because sometimes it's just about habits and it's about ritual. We have a strong hold on our coffee ritual. And if we can put something else nice in there to make us feel like we're having a little treat, sometimes it makes that transition a little easier. So I'll put a couple recipes for things I like. And if you guys want to comment too, what are your favorite caffeine-free or lower caffeine alternatives that you found that help you? That would be awesome. Always looking for good inspiration. But I think with any of this is you just have to try it and see how it works for you. I like to mix up my different, from having a coffee and an almond milk latte, coconut milk latte, to a matcha latte, to a tea one day, to an herbal tea, so that when I really need the energy and the caffeine, it actually works for me. And it's not just something I have every single day that depletes me. So it's just, again, about tuning in and figuring out how it's actually making you feel. And if it's not working, acknowledging that and making some shifts and treating it as an experiment and seeing what happens. Caffeine can also be really dehydrating too, so that can deplete your energy stores as well. So if you are someone that's having a lot of caffeine, in addition to kind of scaling back and swapping out some alternatives, make sure you're adding in enough water and you're drinking a lot, because that can make a really big difference as well. So that's it. The first step is just, considering caffeine. It's how it's making you feel. So let me know in the comments where you're at with that. And what you've learned over the last 3 weeks as well in terms of balancing energy. Next week, I'm talking about the fifth and final step, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's setting energizing boundaries. So as opposed to thinking what we're putting in, we also have to consider what we're letting out and how are we hemorrhaging energy to other areas of our lives. So it's something I've got a lot of thoughts about right now, and I'm excited to talk about that too. So stay tuned for next week. But in the meantime, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. All right, thank you.